My name is Evelyn Rose Harrington. I was 52 years old, born and raised in the United States, living at the time in a quiet neighborhood outside Madison, Wisconsin. From the outside, my life looked stable, respectable, predictable. I worked as a claims coordinator for a mid-sized insurance company, a job I had held for over 2 decades. I was known as reliable, the woman who never missed deadlines, who remembered birthdays, who kept everything running smoothly behind the scenes. I had raised 2 children who were now grown and living their own lives. I was divorced, but not bitter. Independent, people would say. But no one saw what happened when the house went silent at night. Every evening, after the television was turned off and the lights were dimmed, a strange emptiness settled in my chest. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was more like a question that never stopped asking itself. Is this all there is? I had grown up going to church. I knew the stories. I knew the verses. But somewhere along the way, faith became routine instead of real. Prayer became polite words instead of desperate cries. And God, if I'm honest, felt distant, quiet, almost absent. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why my heart felt restless when my life seemed so blessed. I had food, shelter, health, and yet, something was missing. Sometimes I whispered into the darkness, God, if you're real, why do I feel so alone? I didn't hear an answer. At least, not then. In the months before everything changed, that inner unease grew stronger. I began questioning things I had never questioned before: purpose, truth, eternity. I watched the world unravel through the news: fear, division, disasters, confusion everywhere. And deep inside, I felt an unexplainable urgency, as if time itself was speeding up. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't escape it. And I had no idea that my ordinary life, my routines, my doubts, my quiet prayers, were about to collide with something that would shatter everything I thought I knew about death, faith, and Jesus himself. Before I continue, have you ever felt that kind of emptiness, even when life looked fine on the outside? If so, write "I understand" in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone, and neither are you. The signs before the end. Looking back now, I can see the signs so clearly. At the time, I brushed them off as stress, coincidence, getting older, but they weren't random. They were warnings. Weeks before everything happened, my sleep began to change. I would wake up suddenly at 3 a.m., night after night, my heart racing for no obvious reason. The house was quiet, the air heavy. Sometimes I felt an overwhelming urge to pray, even when I didn't know what to say. Other times I felt watched, not in a frightening way, more like a presence waiting patiently. One morning, while driving to work, a thought entered my mind so clearly it startled me. Get your heart ready. I actually said out loud, ready for what? There was no audible answer, just silence, and a strange sense of urgency that stayed with me the entire day. Small things began to feel off. My favorite routines stopped comforting me. The news felt darker than usual. Conversations with coworkers felt shallow, as if everyone was distracted by something they couldn't name. Even my body began sending signals. Tightness in my chest, sudden fatigue, moments where I felt disconnected from my surroundings. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in my car after work, unable to turn the key. Tears streamed down my face without warning. I don't know what's happening to me, I whispered, but something is coming. The strangest sign came 3 days before the accident. I was cleaning out an old drawer when I found a Bible I hadn't opened in years. It fell open on its own to a page I didn't recognize. My eyes landed on a verse about being awake, because the hour comes when you do not expect it. My hands trembled. For the first time in years, I prayed with desperation. God, if you're trying to get my attention, please don't give up on me. That night, I dreamed of light, brighter than anything I had ever seen. I woke up with the same sentence echoing in my mind. This is not the end, but it is a turning point. I didn't know how literal those words would become. Before I go on, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like life was quietly warning you, even before something major happened? Right? I felt it in the comments. Your experience may matter more than you realize. The moment of the accident. The day it happened began like any other. That's the part that still unsettles me the most. No dramatic goodbye, no feeling that this would be my last ordinary morning. I woke up early, made coffee, and stood by the kitchen window watching the sky slowly change color. There was a strange calm in the air. Too calm, almost artificial. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt, as if the world were holding its breath. I went through my routine on autopilot: shower, clothes, keys, purse. Before leaving the house, I hesitated at the door. I can't explain why. My hand rested on the doorknob longer than usual, and an unexpected thought crossed my mind. What if today changes everything? I shook it off. I told myself I was being dramatic. 52-year-old women don't suddenly lose their grip on reality, I thought. I smiled at my own reflection in the hallway mirror and whispered, "Get it together, Evelyn." The drive to work was familiar. Same road, same traffic lights, same radio station quietly playing in the background. But about 15 minutes in, I began to feel strange. Not pain, not fear. More like a pressure, deep in my chest, paired with a sudden wave of dizziness. I turned the radio off. My heart started beating irregularly. Not fast, not slow, just wrong. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter and taking a deep breath. Okay, I murmured. You're fine. But I wasn't. My vision blurred at the edges as if someone were slowly dimming the lights. Sounds became distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I tried to pull over, but my arms felt heavy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. And then came the most terrifying realization of my life. I was losing control of my body, not suddenly, gradually. I remember thinking, this is how it happens. Not with drama, not with noise, just slipping away. I don't remember the impact itself. What I remember is the moment right before. A strange clarity washed over me. The panic vanished, replaced by an unexpected calm. My final conscious thought wasn't fear. It was confusion mixed with surrender. So this is it? I thought. I'm not ready. And then my body stopped responding completely. There was no pain, no darkness, just a sensation like being released, like something unhooked itself from something else. One moment I was inside the car. The next, I wasn't. I became aware that I was watching the scene rather than participating in it. I could see my vehicle pulled to the side of the road. I could see people rushing over, their mouths moving, their faces panicked. But none of it felt like it involved me. The fear I expected never came. Instead, there was a profound stillness, a quiet so deep it felt alive. I remember thinking, why am I not afraid? I felt light, not emotionally, physically light, as if gravity no longer had a claim on me. I tried to move, and I did, not with muscles, but with intention. That's when it hit me. I wasn't inside my body anymore, and somehow, I knew. I didn't panic, I didn't scream, I didn't feel trapped. What I felt was something far more unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Peace. Pure, undeniable peace. The world I had worried about, my job, my regrets, my unanswered prayers, felt suddenly irrelevant. Not unimportant, just distant, like memories from a life that no longer defined me. I sensed that something irreversible had happened, that a door had opened. And once opened, it could never be unseen. Before I continue to what happened next, let me ask you something deeply personal. Have you ever had a moment where everything felt out of your control, yet strangely calm at the same time? If this resonates with you, write "I felt peace" in the comments. Your story matters more than you know. The exact sensation of death. If I had to describe death in one word, it wouldn't be fear. It would be release. There is a misconception we carry our entire lives, that death arrives violently, that it tears us away, that it is chaos and darkness. What I experienced was the opposite. It was quiet, gentle, intentional. When I realized I was no longer inside my body, there was a brief moment of disbelief. Not panic, just surprise. Like realizing you've been holding something heavy for years, and suddenly your hands are empty. I felt myself drifting, not falling, not rising, just moving. There was no sense of direction as we understand it. No up or down, no time. Time itself seemed to dissolve. I could still think, still feel aware, but my thoughts were different. Clearer, lighter. free of the constant mental noise that had followed me my entire life. There was no anxiety, no regret looping in my mind, no unfinished conversations haunting me. Those things simply didn't belong there. I became aware that my identity wasn't tied to my body anymore. I wasn't Evelyn, the woman with a job and a past and a list of mistakes. I was something deeper, something that existed before my name ever mattered. And I understood something instantly, without anyone explaining it. I was not ending. I was transitioning. There was a sensation like warmth, but not heat, like light, but not brightness. It surrounded me, passed through me, and yet felt incredibly personal, as if it knew me. I felt completely seen, not judged, not examined. Seen. Every hidden thought, every private doubt, every prayer I never finished. And instead of shame, I felt acceptance so deep it brought a kind of emotional weightlessness. I remember thinking, so this is what it feels like to be known, and still loved. There was no voice yet, no figure, just presence. And that presence carried an intelligence, a purpose. I sensed that my physical body had stopped functioning, but that information arrived without alarm. It was simply knowledge, like remembering a fact you already knew. I realized something else that shocked me. I didn't want to go back, not because I hated my life, but because where I was felt more real than anything I had ever known, more solid, more true. The worries I had obsessed over for decades, money, approval, fear of failure, felt paper thin now. Temporary illusions I had mistaken for reality. I understood in that moment why people struggle to describe death after returning. Our language isn't built for it. Human words rely on contrast, light versus dark, noise versus silence. But what I was experiencing existed beyond contrast. It simply was. Then came a moment I will never forget. A feeling, not a voice yet, communicated something directly into my awareness. Do not be afraid. You are safe. Those words didn't arrive through sound. They arrived through knowing. And the peace that followed them was overwhelming. Not emotional peace, the kind you feel after a good day, but a foundational peace, like discovering the ground beneath you has always been solid. I realized then that fear was something my body produced. Without it, my soul remembered who it was. I felt myself being gently drawn forward, not pulled. There was no resistance, no struggle, just consent. And as I moved, the environment around me began to change. The stillness deepened. The light intensified, not painfully, not blindingly, but with intention. It felt alive, responsive, aware, as if it recognized me. And I recognized it, not consciously but instinctively, like meeting someone you somehow know without ever having met. That's when I understood something that still brings me to tears. Death is not separation from life. It is separation from illusion. I was more alive in that moment than I had ever been in my physical body. Before I tell you what or who I encountered next, I want to ask you something important. Do you believe peace could exist even beyond this life? Or does the idea feel unfamiliar? Maybe even uncomfortable? Write, "I'm listening" in the comments if your heart feels open right now. Because what comes next changed everything I thought I knew. Leaving the body, seeing the world from beyond. As my awareness continued moving forward, I suddenly realized something astonishing. I could see the physical world again, but this time, I wasn't inside it. There was no confusion about where I was positioned. I wasn't standing, floating, or hovering in a way that made sense to human logic. I was simply aware of the scene below me, clearly, completely, and without obstruction. I could see my car pulled off to the side of the road. The hazard lights blinked rhythmically, casting brief flashes of orange against the pavement. A small crowd had formed, strangers who had stopped, drawn together by concern and urgency. And there, in the middle of it all, was my body. Seeing it should have terrified me. It didn't. I recognized it the way you recognize an old photograph of yourself. Familiar, yes, but not me. Not anymore. It felt like a coat I had worn for decades and finally taken off. I noticed details that would have escaped me before. The way one woman held her phone with shaking hands, the tension in a man's shoulders as he tried to help, the concern etched across their faces. I felt compassion for them, but no attachment. What shocked me most was the absence of panic. I had always assumed that witnessing something like this, watching others tend to your own lifeless body, would trigger fear, regret, desperation. Instead, I felt calm curiosity. I realized something then that still challenges everything we're taught. Consciousness does not depend on the body. I could perceive more clearly than I ever had while alive. My awareness wasn't limited to one direction. I didn't need to turn my head or focus my eyes. I simply knew what was happening. And then something unexpected occurred. I became aware of thoughts, not my own, not in words, but impressions, emotional currents. I could sense the fear of the people around my body, the urgency, the hope that I might still be alive. Their emotions didn't overwhelm me, they passed through me. That's when I understood that emotions, too, are filtered through the physical brain. Without it, I could observe without being consumed. I felt an overwhelming sense of detachment, but not coldness. Love? Yes. Concern? Yes. But without pain. And then, as if to gently redirect my attention, something shifted. The physical scene began to fade, not abruptly, not like turning off a screen, but like a photograph dissolving into light. The sound softened, the colors blurred. The urgency of that world loosened its grip on my awareness. I sensed that I was being invited forward. Not forced, invited. I didn't hear a command. I felt a pull, gentle, patient, purposeful, and with it came a deep understanding. I could not stay there. That world, my old world, was no longer my primary reality. As I turned my attention away from the scene below, the light intensified again. It felt closer now, more personal. The warmth I had sensed earlier returned, stronger than before, and with it came something new. Presence, not vague, not abstract, intentional. I felt accompanied. I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't see a form yet, but I knew that I was not moving through this experience by chance. There was order here, guidance, intelligence far beyond anything human. I felt something like reassurance wrap around my awareness. You are exactly where you need to be. Again, not spoken, understood. And for the first time, a deep emotion rose within me. Trust. I trusted what was happening more than I had ever trusted anything in my physical life. I realized how much of my human existence had been shaped by fear. Fear of losing control, fear of the unknown, fear of death itself. And now, the very thing I had feared had stripped fear away completely. I wanted to tell the people below me that everything was okay, that death was not what they thought, that love didn't end. But I understood that communication between those two states wasn't meant to work that way. Not yet. The light ahead of me began to form, not into a shape, but into a direction, like a doorway without walls. And as I moved toward it, anticipation grew. Not nervous anticipation, but reverent expectation. I sensed that someone, was waiting, and that whatever came next would redefine everything I believed about God, truth, and eternity. Before I tell you what happened when I crossed that threshold, I want to pause and ask you something deeply personal. If you could see the world from beyond your body, what do you think would matter less? And what would matter more? Write your answer in the comments. Even a single word is enough. Your reflection might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. The light that did not hurt the eyes. The light grew stronger as I moved forward, but not in the way sunlight does. It didn't blind me. It didn't force me to look away. Instead, it felt as though it welcomed my attention. If you've ever tried to stare directly at the sun, you know the instinct is to shield your eyes. This light inspired the opposite reaction. I wanted to move closer. I wanted to be inside it. It felt familiar, like something I had known long before I ever had a body. The closer I came, the more I realized this light wasn't just illumination. It was presence. It carried intention, awareness, love. Not emotional love like humans experience, but something purer, deeper, more intelligent. A love that didn't fluctuate. A love that didn't demand. It simply was. And as it surrounded me, something extraordinary happened. I felt memories rise. Not memories from this life, but something older. A sense of origin. As if my soul remembered a home my mind had forgotten. There was no confusion, only recognition. I didn't feel small in that light. I felt known. Every insecurity I had carried as a human, every question of worth, every fear of not being enough, collapsed instantly. Not because I was reassured verbally, but because the light itself answered those doubts without words. I understood, in a way that bypassed logic. I had always been loved, even when I doubted it, especially when I doubted it. There was no judgment in that realization, only clarity. The light responded to my awareness. When I focused on it, it intensified gently, like it was acknowledging me. When I felt curiosity, it seemed to open further, revealing depth upon depth, layers of meaning, understanding, and truth. It was alive. And then, something shifted again. Within the light, a distinction began to form. Not a separation, but a focus. Like the light itself was drawing my attention to a specific presence within it. I felt my awareness slow. Reverence washed over me. Not fear, awe. I knew without being told that I was approaching someone of immense authority and compassion. Someone whose presence shaped the very fabric of this place. My first instinct was humility, not shame, not unworthiness, just a deep instinctive respect. I felt like I was standing before truth itself, and yet there was no barrier between us, no distance, no intimidation. The closer I came, the more the light seemed to wrap around me, not enclosing, but embracing. I felt seen more fully than ever before, and instead of wanting to hide, I wanted to open myself completely. I realized then something that shook me to my core. Nothing about me was hidden here, and nothing about me needed to be defended. The light knew every failure, every doubt, every quiet moment when I questioned God's silence. And still, it welcomed me. I sensed that the next moment would change everything, that I was about to encounter the source of the presence itself. My awareness felt steady, grounded, alert. I was not overwhelmed, I was prepared, somehow. And just before the encounter fully revealed itself, a profound understanding settled within me. This light was not a place I visited. It was a reality I had forgotten. Before I describe what happened next, I need to pause and ask you something important. When you think of God, do you imagine judgment first or love? Be honest with yourself. Write one word in the comments, just one, that describes how you truly feel when you think about God right now. Your answer matters more than you might realize. The encounter with Jesus. The moment I became fully aware of who was before me, everything within me stilled. The light did not disappear, but it focused. It was as if infinity itself had chosen a center. And from that center came a presence so unmistakable, so complete, that recognition happened instantly. I didn't need to ask. I didn't need to be told. I knew. This was Jesus. Not the distant figure from paintings or sermons, not the softened image I had carried from childhood stories. This was Jesus as reality, alive, aware, and infinitely present. His presence carried authority, but not dominance, power, but not force. There was a depth to him that felt ancient and immediate at the same time, as if he existed beyond time, yet fully within this moment with me. What struck me first was his attention. It was absolute. When he looked at me, it felt as though the entirety of his awareness was focused on me alone, not divided, not shared, complete. And in that gaze, I felt something break open inside my soul. I had spent my entire life trying to be seen, by family, by partners, by society, by God. And here I was, seen completely. There were no words at first. None were needed. His presence communicated more than language ever could. I felt emotions rise within me, relief, humility, gratitude, but they didn't overwhelm me. They flowed freely, without pain. I sensed that he knew my entire story, not just the events, but the why behind them. He knew the prayers I never finished, the doubts I was ashamed to admit, the moments I smiled in public and cried alone at night, and none of it caused disappointment. That realization alone was life-altering. Then, gently, unmistakably, I felt communication begin, not through sound, through understanding. You were never abandoned, he conveyed, even when you believed I was silent. Those words settled into me with weight and warmth. I realized how often I had mistaken silence for absence, How often I had measured God's love by circumstances instead of truth. I felt something like regret rise within me. Not guilt, but clarity. A seeing of my life without distortion. I saw moments where fear had guided me instead of faith. Moments where comfort had mattered more than truth. But Jesus did not condemn me. He revealed me to myself. And in that revelation, there was mercy. I sensed him drawing my attention, not to my failures, but to the world. Images and impressions unfolded around us, not like a movie, but like knowledge being placed directly into my awareness. I saw humanity restless, distracted, searching for meaning in noise. I felt the weight of confusion pressing down on people everywhere. Fear of the future, fear of loss, fear of death. And then came something that shifted the atmosphere entirely. Urgency, not panic, but seriousness. Jesus communicated something that made my awareness sharpen completely. What is coming will test many hearts. I felt the gravity of those words instantly. This was not metaphor, not symbolism. It was warning. He showed me how many people believed they were prepared, spiritually, emotionally, but were not rooted in truth. How easily fear would lead them. How deception would appear comforting rather than threatening. And then he made something very clear to me. Time matters, not in the way humans measure it, but in consequence. I understood that the reason I was there was not only for me, it was for others. I felt unworthy of that responsibility. The thought formed instantly. Why me? I was ordinary, quiet, flawed, not a leader, not a theologian. But before I could even form the question fully, the answer came. Because you will tell them exactly what you saw. No embellishment, no exaggeration, just truth. I sensed that my return, if I returned, would not be easy. That sharing this message would invite doubt, criticism, and rejection. But I also sensed that obedience mattered more than comfort. Jesus' presence remained gentle, but the message carried weight. This was not about fear. It was about preparation. As the encounter continued, I felt that what he would reveal next would be specific, clear, and directly connected to the near future. And I understood something that made my soul tremble. What he was about to show me could not be ignored. Before I continue and share the first revelation he gave me, I want to stop and ask you something important. If Jesus were standing before you right now, what question would rise first in your heart? Write that question in the comments, even if it's just one sentence. Sometimes naming the question is the beginning of the answer, the first revelation. What is about to happen? When Jesus shifted his focus, the atmosphere around us changed. The peace remained, but it was joined by clarity so sharp it felt like awakening from a deep sleep. I sensed that what I was about to receive was not symbolic or distant. This was not about centuries from now. This was near. Jesus did not overwhelm me with information all at once. Instead, understanding unfolded carefully, as if he knew exactly how much my soul could hold without breaking. The first thing he revealed was not an event, but a condition. The world is entering a season of exposure. I understood immediately what that meant. Not exposure in the sense of embarrassment, but revelation. Things hidden beneath comfort, distraction, and noise would no longer remain concealed. Motives, foundations, truths people had avoided. Jesus showed me how systems built on fear rather than truth would begin to fracture. Not all at once, not dramatically at first, but steadily. What shocked me most was this. The greatest struggle would not be physical, it would be spiritual and emotional. I saw people overwhelmed not by a single disaster, but by accumulation. Constant uncertainty, conflicting voices, information without wisdom, noise without peace. Jesus communicated this clearly. Many will mistake confusion for normal. That sentence pierced me. I understood that people would adapt to instability rather than question it. That fear would become background noise. And in that environment, discernment would weaken. Then he revealed something more specific. I was shown a sense, not images, but knowing that a period of global shaking would intensify. Not necessarily one catastrophic moment, but a sequence of pressures that would test trust, patience, and faith. Jesus made something very clear to me. This season would reveal what people are anchored to. Those anchored to fear would be easily moved. Those anchored to comfort would feel betrayed. Those anchored to truth would be shaken. but not destroyed. I felt the weight of responsibility growing inside me as I received this. Then came a warning that startled me, not because it was harsh, but because it was honest. Many will look for signs outside themselves and ignore what is happening within. Jesus showed me how easily people chase predictions, timelines, and external explanations, while neglecting their inner state. He emphasized that preparation was not about knowing dates. It was about alignment. Heart, mind, spirit. I understood that the greatest danger ahead was not what would happen to people, but what fear would do inside them. Jesus communicated something deeply personal to me at that moment. Do not let fear decide who you become. That message wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. I realized then that the reason this revelation mattered was not to alarm, but to awaken. Jesus wasn't showing me the future to create panic. He was revealing it to invite readiness. He made something unmistakably clear. There is still time, but not for delay. Not delay in love, not delay in forgiveness, not delay in truth. I sensed that many people believed they would get serious later. Later about faith, later about purpose, later about reconciliation. But later is an illusion. Jesus emphasized that the coming season would amplify whatever already existed in people's hearts. Peace would deepen peace. Fear would multiply fear. Nothing would remain neutral. That realization was sobering. And then he communicated something that shook me deeply. Many believe they are awake. Few are attentive. I understood that awareness without action would not be enough. That hearing truth without responding to it would harden hearts rather than prepare them. Jesus wasn't asking for perfection. He was asking for honesty. Honesty about fear. Honesty about doubt. Honesty about what truly holds first place in people's lives. As this first revelation concluded, I felt a gentle but firm urging within me. Tell them this is not about predicting the future. It is about choosing who they trust now. I felt both humbled and overwhelmed by the responsibility of carrying this message back. And yet, there was more. This was only the first revelation. What came next would be even more specific, more urgent, and directly connected to the months ahead. Before I continue, I need to pause and ask you something sincerely. What do you feel most right now when you look at the world? Fear, confusion, hope, or expectation? Write one word in the comments that best describes your heart at this moment. Your honesty may help someone else realize they're not alone. The second and third revelations, humanity and faith. After the weight of his words settled within me, there was a brief stillness. Not silence, but attention. I sensed that Jesus was allowing my understanding to catch up with what my soul had just received. Then, without warning, my awareness was opened again. This time, not outward, but inward. What he showed me next was not a single event. It was humanity itself. I became aware of countless lives at once. Not faces or names, but inner states, thoughts, fears, longings. I felt the emotional undercurrent of the world, and it was overwhelming in a way I had never imagined while alive. Jesus revealed to me that many people are not living from conviction, but from exhaustion. I felt it clearly. People are tired. Tired of uncertainty. Tired of disappointment. Tired of believing things will get better someday. And in that exhaustion, something dangerous is happening. People are lowering their standards for truth just to feel safe. That realization struck me deeply. Jesus showed me how faith, for many, had become conditional, dependent on comfort, dependent on outcomes. When life felt stable, faith seemed easy. But when pressure increased, faith became negotiable. I understood that this was the second revelation. Faith without roots will not endure what is coming. Jesus did not say this with anger. He said it with sorrow. I felt his compassion for those who believed they had faith, but had never tested it beyond routine. He showed me how many people confuse familiarity with devotion, attendance with surrender, words with trust. And then he revealed something even more unsettling. Many people are not walking away from faith because they hate God. They are walking away because they are disappointed that God did not meet their expectations. That truth pierced me. Jesus showed me how expectations, unspoken, unexamined, had quietly replaced trust in many hearts. People had believed, yes, but they had also assumed outcomes. When those outcomes did not arrive, confusion turned into resentment. I felt the weight of that misunderstanding pressing down on humanity. Then came the third revelation. This one was quieter, but heavier. Jesus revealed that discernment would become rare, not because truth would disappear, but because noise would multiply. I felt the intensity of information flooding the world. Opinions presented as facts, feelings elevated above wisdom, voices shouting over one another, all claiming certainty. In that environment, Jesus showed me how easy it would be for people to follow what feels right instead of what is true. He communicated this clearly. Many will confuse agreement with truth. That sentence echoed within me. I understood that people would gather around voices that affirmed them rather than challenged them. That comfort would be mistaken for confirmation, and that faith would be reshaped to avoid discomfort instead of pursuing transformation. Jesus did not say this to condemn. He revealed it to warn. He showed me that the test ahead would not be about belief in name, but belief in practice. Not about claiming faith, but living it when it costs something. I saw how fear would pressure people to compromise quietly, not in dramatic moments, but in small decisions, small silences, small justifications. And then Jesus revealed something that filled me with both sorrow and hope. Even in this, grace remains available. He showed me that awakening often comes through discomfort, that moments of shaking are not meant to destroy, but to reveal what cannot be shaken. Faith, he showed me, is not proven in ease. It is revealed in pressure. I felt the urgency grow stronger. Jesus communicated that the coming months would force many people to confront what they truly trust: systems, leaders, narratives, even their own understanding. And in that confrontation, some would harden, but others would awaken. He emphasized that humility would be the dividing line. Those willing to admit uncertainty would be guided. Those clinging to certainty without truth would struggle. I realized that this message was not about choosing sides. It was about choosing posture, listening instead of assuming, seeking instead of defending, trusting instead of controlling. As these revelations settled, I felt a deep responsibility forming within me, not as pressure, but as purpose. I understood that my role was not to convince, but to testify, not to argue, but to invite. Jesus made it clear that what he would reveal next would be even more specific, connected to timing, urgency, and preparation before a defined season. Before I share those final revelations, I need to pause and ask you something sincerely. When your beliefs are challenged, do you become defensive or curious? Be honest with yourself. Write one word in the comments that describes how you usually respond when your faith is tested. Your honesty could help someone else recognize where they are right now. The fourth and fifth revelations. Before January 2026, when Jesus began to reveal what came next, I felt the atmosphere change again. The peace remained, but now it was paired with precision. I understood immediately that what he was about to show me was not distant, symbolic, or abstract. This was not about generations far in the future. This was about a defined window of time, one that humanity was already moving toward. And I felt with unmistakable clarity that before January 2026, a turning point would occur. Not a single moment that everyone would recognize all at once, but a sequence of realizations that would leave no one unchanged. The fourth revelation began with a word that echoed through my awareness: acceleration. Jesus showed me that everything people already sensed, change, instability, pressure, would begin to move faster. Decisions would carry heavier consequences. Delays would cost more. Neutrality would become harder to maintain. I understood that many people would say, "Things feel different now," and they would be right. Jesus revealed that before January 2026, illusion would lose its strength. Narratives that once felt secure would begin to contradict themselves. Promises people trusted would fail to deliver peace. Confidence in human control would quietly erode. What struck me most was this: the greatest shock would not come from chaos, but from disappointment. People would realize that what they relied on emotionally, spiritually, or ideologically could not sustain them when pressure increased. Jesus showed me how many people have built their inner lives on unstable ground: validation, certainty, comfort, or identity tied to external approval. And when those foundations shook, anxiety would rise rapidly. He communicated this clearly. Many will feel unprepared, not because they lacked information, but because they avoided transformation. That sentence stayed with me. I understood that preparation was not about stockpiling knowledge or predicting outcomes. It was about inner alignment, truth taking root deeply enough to remain steady under pressure. Then came the fifth revelation. This one was quieter, but heavier than the others. Jesus revealed that division would intensify, not only between groups, but within individuals. People would feel torn between what they know is right and what feels easier, between conviction and convenience, between truth and belonging. I felt the emotional weight of that struggle. Jesus showed me how fear of isolation would lead many to compromise silently, not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly, through silence, avoidance, and self-justification. He warned me that before January 2026, clarity would cost something. Not everyone would be willing to pay that cost. But then, hope emerged. Jesus revealed that alongside this pressure, a quiet awakening would also occur. Not loud, not viral, not celebrated, but real. I sensed people choosing honesty over image, depth over noise, surrender over control. And though they would be fewer, their stability would stand out sharply against the surrounding unrest. Jesus made this unmistakably clear. Those who choose truth will not be spared difficulty, but they will not be overtaken by fear. That distinction mattered deeply. I realized that what was coming was not about escaping hardship, but about enduring it without losing oneself. Jesus showed me that the months leading into 2026 would expose what people truly worship, not in words, but in reliance. What they turn to first when pressure rises. What they trust to define them. He emphasized that identity would be tested. Those who built their identity on roles, labels, or external affirmation would feel shaken. Those anchored in truth would feel pressure, but also purpose. I sensed that many people would ask, "Why do I feel unsettled?" And the answer would be simple: because comfort is no longer enough. Jesus did not reveal these things to frighten me. He revealed them to prepare me and those who would hear this message. He communicated something that still echoes within me. This is not the end of hope. It is the end of pretending. As these revelations concluded, I felt the urgency peak. Not frantic urgency, but decisive urgency, the kind that calls for action without panic. I understood that time was not being taken away. It was being clarified. Every choice would matter more. Every delay would shape momentum. Every act of honesty would strengthen foundation. Before Jesus turned my awareness toward my return, I felt compelled to pause. And now I want to pause with you. When you think about the months ahead, what do you feel most strongly? Fear, urgency, resistance, or readiness? Write one word in the comments that best describes your heart right now. Your honesty may help someone else recognize what they're feeling too. The return to the body and the pain of coming back. I didn't want to leave. That truth settled into me before I was even aware that leaving was about to happen. After everything Jesus had shown me, the clarity, the love, the purpose, the unbearable beauty of truth, I felt complete in a way I had never known was possible. There was no confusion there, no doubt, no fear of being misunderstood or alone. And then, gently but unmistakably, I sensed a shift. Not rejection, not dismissal, transition. Jesus' presence remained steady, but I understood that our encounter was reaching a boundary I could not cross. Not yet. I felt a mixture of emotions rise within me: reluctance, sadness, gratitude, and something like holy responsibility. I knew what was coming before it happened. I was being sent back. The realization hit me harder than anything else in the experience. I didn't protest. Not because I didn't want to, but because I understood why. I sensed that my return was part of the message itself, that what I had been shown could not stay with me alone. Still, it hurt. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. There was a heaviness to the idea of returning to a body that felt fragile now, limited, loud, dense, a place where misunderstanding and doubt existed. I felt Jesus' attention settle on me again, complete, gentle, unshakable. And I understood something without words. You will not lose what you were given. That reassurance mattered more than anything. Then the transition began. The light that had surrounded me didn't vanish. It receded, like stepping away from the shore while still feeling the warmth of the sun. The clarity softened, the stillness thinned. I felt layers returning: weight, resistance, sensation. Time reintroduced itself. I felt myself moving, not forward this time, but inward, compressing, narrowing, as if infinite awareness was being gently folded back into a finite vessel. And then came the shock. The body. I became aware of it suddenly, and the contrast was overwhelming. Where there had been peace, there was noise. Where there had been lightness, there was density. Where there had been freedom, there was confinement. I felt breath again, ragged, unfamiliar. Sensation returned unevenly. Sound rushed in like a wave, voices, movement, urgency. My thoughts felt slower, heavier, fragmented. I remember a sharp emotional pain, not from injury, but from loss. I had tasted something real. And now I was back. Tears came before words. I felt grief, not because I had died, but because I had returned. It felt like being exiled from home. I didn't want to open my eyes. I didn't want to fully re-enter this world yet. And yet, I knew I had to. The days that followed were harder than I expected. Physically, I recovered. Slowly. But emotionally and spiritually, I struggled. I felt disconnected from ordinary conversation, from trivial concerns, from routines that once defined my days. I found myself sitting alone, overwhelmed by what I had seen, and by how impossible it felt to explain. How do you describe infinity in a language built for limits? How do you explain peace to people who have never felt it? I felt isolated, not because I lacked people, but because I carried something sacred that didn't fit easily into everyday life. And then came the doubt. Not my own, but others. When I finally began to share pieces of what had happened, reactions varied. Some listened quietly. Some nodded politely. Others looked uncomfortable, skeptical, dismissive. I understood then what Jesus had prepared me for. Truth doesn't always feel welcome. I had moments where I questioned myself, not the experience, but my ability to carry it well. I asked God privately, did I really understand it all? And in those moments, I felt a quiet reminder within me. You are not responsible for how they receive it, only for telling it. That became my anchor. I realized that returning wasn't about resuming my old life unchanged. It was about living differently, speaking carefully, loving deeply, and refusing to let fear silence what mattered. I felt a mission settle into my everyday moments. Not a loud mission, not a dramatic one, a faithful one. To speak when prompted, to listen more than argue, to point toward truth without force. And above all, to remind people that what feels stable may not last, but what is true will endure. Before I move to the final chapter, the mission that now defines my life, I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt like you don't fully belong to the world the way you used to? If that resonates with you, write "I feel that too" in the comments. Sometimes recognizing the feeling is the first step toward understanding why it's there. The mission that cannot be ignored. After I returned, life did not return to normal. How could it? Normal had been redefined. I woke up each morning with the same house, the same streets, the same responsibilities, but something inside me had shifted permanently. The world felt thinner, almost transparent, as if what I had seen beyond it was now closer than what was in front of me. I understood that I hadn't been brought back to resume my old life. I had been brought back to reframe it. At first, I resisted the idea of a mission. That word felt too large, too dramatic. I was still an ordinary woman, 52 years old, imperfect, unsure, and very aware of my limitations. I didn't feel qualified to carry something this weighty, but the calling didn't come as a command. It came as a quiet insistence. I noticed it in small moments. When someone spoke about fear of the future, my heart stirred. When people joked about death to avoid thinking about it, I felt a pull to speak gently, but truthfully. When conversations drifted toward despair, something in me refused to stay silent. I realized the mission wasn't about preaching. It was about witnessing, about telling what I saw without decoration, about reminding people that fear is not the deepest truth, and never has been, about helping others recognize that the unease they feel isn't meaningless. It's a signal. I understood that many people sense something is changing but don't have language for it. They feel restless, anxious, disconnected, or spiritually numb, and assume something is wrong with them. But what I was shown told a different story. The discomfort is not random. It is invitation. An invitation to examine what we trust. An invitation to release what no longer holds. An invitation to choose depth over distraction. Jesus did not send me back to scare people. He sent me back to wake them gently. I began to understand that the message I carry isn't about dates or fear or control. It's about readiness of heart, about honesty, about humility, about choosing truth even when it's inconvenient. I also learned something difficult. Not everyone wants to be awakened. Some people prefer certainty, even if it's false, over truth that requires change. And that's where I had to let go of outcomes. I could not measure success by agreement, only by faithfulness. There were days I felt alone in this calling. Days when it would have been easier to keep quiet, to blend back into comfort, to pretend nothing had happened. But every time I considered silence, I felt that same inner reminder. What you were given was not meant to be buried. I realized the mission was not to convince the world. It was to reach the one who is ready, the one watching late at night, feeling unseen, the one who feels spiritually restless but can't explain why, the one who senses that time matters more now than it used to. If that person hears this message and pauses, just for a moment, to reflect, then obedience has done its work. I also came to understand something crucial. Preparation does not mean panic. It means alignment. It means asking hard questions now instead of later. It means forgiving sooner, letting go faster, listening more carefully. It means choosing who you want to be when pressure rises, before it does. The mission Jesus entrusted to me is simple, but not easy. Tell them they are not alone. Tell them fear is not final. Tell them truth still holds. And most of all, tell them there is still time to respond. Not respond with perfection. Respond with honesty. If you've listened this far, I believe it's not by accident. Something in you recognized something here. So now let me speak directly to you. If your heart feels stirred, if something in you feels unsettled but hopeful, if you sense that comfort is no longer enough, that doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something is awakening. Before I close, I want to ask you, clearly and sincerely, what is this moment asking you to change, release, or choose differently? Write your answer in the comments, even if it's just one word. Your response could be the clarity someone else is searching for. And if this message resonated with you, don't walk away quietly. Share your thoughts. Engage. Stay connected. Because the days ahead will favor those who are attentive, not distracted. If you want to continue reflecting on messages like this, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, stay present, and walk this journey with us. Truth doesn't shout, but it does call. And now that you've heard it, what will you do with it? Write your answer in the comments. If you are still here, still reading, still listening, that matters. In a world full of noise, distraction, and endless scrolling, attention is never accidental. Something in you chose to stay. Something in you recognized a familiar weight in these words. And I want you to know something clearly. You didn't stay because of curiosity alone. You stayed because something inside you resonates with truth. After everything I experienced, after returning, after sharing, after being doubted, questioned, and sometimes misunderstood, I have learned this. The people who are meant to hear this message don't rush through it. They pause, they reflect. They feel something they can't easily explain. Maybe that's you. Since my return, I've had countless quiet moments where I asked myself why this message feels so urgent, why it presses against my heart even when I'm tired, even when I wish I could just live quietly again. And the answer always comes back the same, because too many people are living disconnected from their own souls. They wake up, go through routines, consume information, worry about tomorrow, and ignore the quiet inner voice asking deeper questions. Questions like, why does time feel different lately? Why do I feel unsettled even when things seem fine? Why does the future feel closer than it used to? Those questions are not weakness. They are awareness. What I was shown was never meant to turn people into followers of fear. It was meant to help people recognize the moment they're living in. We are in a season where distraction is easy, but discernment is rare. Where information is everywhere, but wisdom is scarce. Where comfort is praised, but truth often feels inconvenient. And yet, this is also a season of invitation. An invitation to slow down internally, even as the world speeds up. An invitation to choose depth over noise. An invitation to stop postponing what matters most. You don't need to have everything figured out, but you do need to be honest. Honest about what you're afraid of. Honest about what you're avoiding. Honest about what you keep telling yourself you'll deal with later. Later is uncertain, but now is real. One of the most important things I learned is this. Preparation is not about knowing what will happen. It's about knowing who you are when it does. Are you anchored in fear or in truth? Are you guided by noise or by conviction? Are you living reactively or intentionally? These questions are not meant to accuse you. They are meant to free you. If you feel resistance while reading this, that's okay. Resistance often appears right before clarity. If you feel emotion rising, sadness, urgency, even frustration, that's not random either. Something is stirring, and you don't have to face it alone. That's why I keep asking you to write in the comments. Not for numbers, not for visibility, but because naming something gives it shape. So let me ask you again, clearly, gently, honestly. What is the one thing this message made you reflect on the most? Fear, time, faith, purpose, letting go? Write it in the comments, even if it's just one word. And let me ask you something else, just as important. Do you feel more awake now than you did before you started reading? If yes, write "I feel awake" in the comments. If you're not sure yet, write "I'm thinking." Both are valid. Awakening doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a thought you can't shake, or a feeling that won't let you go back to sleep the same way. If this message resonated with you, don't walk away in silence. Engage, reflect, stay connected. Because the days ahead will reward those who are attentive, not those who are distracted. And if you want to continue receiving messages like this, messages that don't shout but call, then subscribe to the channel and stay with us. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. And now that you've reached the end, the most important part begins with a choice only you can make. What will you do differently after this? Write your answer in the comments. There is a moment that comes after every powerful experience. A moment when the emotions settle, when the words stop echoing so loudly, when you are left alone with what remains. This chapter exists for that moment. Because after everything I shared, after the encounter, the revelations, the return, the mission, what truly matters is not what I experienced. It's what you do with what you've heard. Most people move through life surrounded by constant noise, screens, opinions, expectations, urgency that never rests. And over time, that noise becomes familiar, comfortable, even addictive. But familiarity is not the same as truth. One of the clearest understandings I brought back with me is this. When the noise fades, what remains is who you truly are. Not your role, not your reputation, not your productivity, just you, your fears, your hopes, your unresolved questions, and whether you listen to them or keep running. Many people think awakening requires dramatic moments, crises, loss, pain, near-death experiences. Sometimes it does, but often, awakening begins much more quietly. It begins with discomfort you can't explain, with restlessness that doesn't go away, with a sense that the life you're living no longer fits the way it used to. If that's happening to you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are being invited. Invited to slow down internally. Invited to examine what you've been avoiding. Invited to choose intentionally instead of drifting. The hardest part of this process isn't change, it's honesty. Honesty about what no longer satisfies you. Honesty about what you're afraid to lose. Honesty about the version of yourself you've outgrown. And that honesty can feel frightening because it removes excuses. You can no longer say, "I didn't know." But it also brings freedom. Because once you see clearly, you are no longer trapped by confusion. One thing Jesus made unmistakably clear to me is that fear thrives in vagueness, but loses power in clarity. When you name what you're afraid of, it shrinks. When you name what matters to you, it sharpens. That's why I keep inviting you to write in the comments. Not as a ritual, as an act of clarity, So let me ask you something directly. Right now, in this moment, what part of your life feels the most misaligned lately? Your faith? Your relationships? Your purpose? Your use of time? Write it in the comments, even if it feels uncomfortable, especially if it feels uncomfortable. Another truth I learned is this: time does not wait for certainty. It responds to decision. You don't need perfect understanding to take a meaningful step. You need willingness. Willingness to forgive someone you've been holding at a distance. Willingness to stop numbing yourself with distraction. Willingness to admit you want more depth, more truth, more meaning. Those choices don't make headlines, but they reshape lives. You may feel like what you do doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. That's a lie. The most significant shifts never start globally. They start internally. And then they spread quietly, through conversations, through presence, through how you respond instead of react. If you're still reading, I believe something in you already knows this. So I want to ask you another question, one that requires courage. If nothing changes, where will you be emotionally and spiritually 1 year from now? Sit with that. Then ask yourself, what is one small decision you could make today that moves you toward truth instead of comfort? Write that decision in the comments. Make it real. Make it visible. Because once you name it, you've already begun. This message, this entire story, was never about predicting the future. It was about preparing the heart, not through fear, through awareness. And awareness always leads to choice. So before I close this chapter, let me say this to you plainly. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not alone in feeling this way, but you are responsible for what you do next. If this message stirred something in you, don't ignore it. Engage, reflect, respond. And if you want to continue walking this path of clarity, depth, and readiness, stay connected, subscribe to the channel, and keep the conversation alive. Because truth doesn't rush you, but it does wait for your answer. What is your answer? Write it in the comments.